Pretty
Very good. Oh, you're so funny, Robert.
I'm going to use all of this.
I think I'll be on for another 30 minutes.
And then now imagine you just went like shocked, absolute shock.
What? Oh my God!
And we're done.
That'll make a great podcast.
Hope you enjoyed the show.
See you next week.
The bliss of the abyss, it's here now.
Welcome back to the Bliss of the Abyss. My name is Robin Neumark Jones. Thank you for tuning in to the show. Well, I hope you're enjoying this beautiful spring weather that we are having, and that everything is good with you where you are in the world. Today on the show we have another entry in the Passenger series. This time we have Dan Milne, and we are later also joined by his partner Jane Nash, who described their work together in narrative. Before Jane joins the show, me and Dan talk about what the difference is between terrible and brilliant work, salsa dancing at Christmas on Broadway, two men talking, and then Jane does join us and we talk about narrative, the company that they run together, storytelling, truth and lies, and so much more. So, without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dan Milne, featuring Jane Nash.
It's a cat or a dog.
Yes.
I mean, I love a dog, but it's a different kind of commitment.
That's a lot of work.
And we've got so many friends who are like, no, we're worried about so and so. We've got, whatever we've got to get back for. We can't go away. And we're like, no, that doesn't really work with a life that is kind of, all over the place.
And don't you already have to do that with children? Like, one of the nice things about cats is it's kind of like a grown-up child, maybe a bit more. It still requires you to have the care and maintenance.
We've done it with the children. They have gone off. We've put them out at night and they haven't come back, so that's fine.
But anyway, thank you for coming on the show. I'm really excited to chat about talk about whatever. For those of you who don't know who you are, Dan, how would you describe yourself in 3 short, snappy adjectives?
You are kidding me.
And now give me your favourite Shakespeare monologue, and then we'll let you know if you've been successful.
And a song. Well, I'm a portfolio person now. Isn't that what we say? Or hyphenated?
A multi-hyphenated.
Multi-hyphenated.
I have to resist that because my surname already is that. So I just don't want to.
Well, and all that means really is that, I'm an actor. I started as an actor and then as a director. And I started doing that in a time when you did one thing. You chose what you were going to do and you did it. And now I think there's so much more permission to go, I do this and I do that and I have a podcast and I have this and I have this little business over there where I sell this online and all that. And so that was always going to be the beginning of my journey, I guess, to
acting.
Act. Yeah.
How early did you know?
About 6, I think. It's a kind of funny cliche that just sounds like it's the small child that wants attention, which I quite possibly was, But I had there was this thing. My dad was involved in amateur theatre, and I remember the day that he was coming back from a rehearsal to tell me whether I might be able to be in the play, and I think I was 6. I had a limited understanding of what that was, but I was so excited that I was going to be in Macbeth playing one of Macduff's children that was going to be killed. That was, and so from that age, I was one of those people that was like, I know what I want to do, but that can also be a curse.
Yeah,
because it's like, and what if you don't get the thing that you've always only ever wanted to do?
Which happens in our industry all the fucking time. In our
industry, there's no single route that you can be sure of.
No.
But that wasn't the story for me. So I was an actor, but I did just get to a point where I wanted more control. I wanted more agency, and I wasn't going to be the person that sat around waiting for the phone to ring. Now, why it's different now is because there's so much more agency. You can make work all the time. And well, I'm sure we'll kind of talk about how I started making work, but now I do all sorts of things as well as acting. So
you don't have like a
3 words.
3 words. That
Not
was
3 minutes.
I'll cut it down.
I
do things.
I just went for multi-hyphenated or portfolio.
So you don't think of one hat as the main hat. You think of I suppose
A creative.
a creative.
I mean, it sounds so fancy, but
The hats are related, aren't they? You don't have completely separate worlds in that way.
No,
there's a spectrum across the things.
they're very related, and I think one of the things I've tried to do as I've got older is to kind of bring them into line more, so that everything I do feels like it's feeding me creatively, I guess. I said I'm a creative, and that's because I think that's the space where I feel really fulfilled and really have agency and really I'm giving something to the world. I mean, I'm making something that I'm trying to communicate with. And
do you remember the first piece of work where you felt that way? Because I think back to some of my early professional work, and some of it's quite good, some of it's really bad.
For all of us, we've been on that.
Exactly. And I just wonder if there's like a moment. I mean, you can tell me about some really bad work. Those are always fun stories. But also some early piece of work where you're like, I have found a thing here that is really right and shows me that I'm on this right path. It was the right decision to go through all the heartache, all the training. You went to Drama Studio London, didn't you? Of course.
Studio, yeah.
And so you've invested a lot of time, effort and energy into that. And of course, it doesn't always just immediately happen. You don't just waltz into a Hollywood A-list role. So yeah, some of that, some terrible early work, but then also maybe some meaningful, interesting early work.
Well, of course, it's not always the early work that's terrible. I mean, that would be a lovely journey.
Are you talking about The Passenger, Mr. Milne?
Through the terrible work to the brilliant work. No, I mean, I hesitate to say it was terrible, but it was an ill-conceived idea, really.
Tell me the story.
I'll tell you the story. So the piece was kind of inspired by the Rocky Horror Show. There's no doubt about that. The name of it, I won't tell you the name, but we can always edit it out. The name of it was Rockula. And so it was Dracula.
I cringed a little bit, Dan, already.
Just a little. And what I will say is that the people in it were great. I had a really good time, and they were very talented. They were better than the piece, in which there was a kind of Dracula figure, and I went from kind of Rocky Horror Show nerd with glasses and a quiff to a vampire. I mean, there was some,
How old were you?
Oh, I was not young. I mean, how old was I? I was in my early 30s, I think.
Okay,
or around 30,
Yeah, okay.
And I had a laugh. Some of those shows, you just have a laugh. It was one of the ones where my mum said, I'm not sure we're going to come and see this one. I was like, really? Don't you come and see everything you do? Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to come and see this one, though. I think they did in the end, and they kind of, they were like, that's why we weren't going to come and see it. What we just saw was what we thought, why we might not come and see it.
The bliss of the abyss.
Okay. You talked about meaningful work, or the first time I worked with Tim Supple at the Young Vic. Now, Tim is the director of the play that we're in at the moment, so you've got your own experience of working with Tim. And I'd known Tim for a bit. I'd worked with him at university, and I'd then done some stuff, a little thing with him at the National. But he'd just taken over the Young Vic, and unbeknownst to us, at this moment in time, the Young Vic was embattled, was struggling. And in the rehearsal period, Tim was having to go off and fight for the survival of the theatre, which we didn't know. Yeah, we'd see him put a suit on in rehearsal period at lunchtime, and he'd go off and have board meetings or meet the Arts Council, in which he had to tell them, we can't pay these actors at the end of this week that we're rehearsing. But that was all a story that I kind of heard later.
Yeah.
What we were doing is we were making this piece called Grim Tales, which
I saw when I was a kid,
which
right?
you saw, which is a crazy thing, isn't it? You saw it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd forgotten as I started to say that. You saw it, yeah. And you, whatever memory you have, it's probably quite visceral, because what we tried to do with these Brothers Grimm tales was make them really true to the originals and pretty hard-hitting. Like, fuck Disney. Forget all that.
Yeah.
It's like...
When you read the original fairy tales, you're like, oh, they had a different... Yeah, they laid it on thick. It was, and almost all of them end in just a grisly, gruesome way as well. And it's like, learn your lessons, children.
Kind of, but they don't all end grisly. They're not all like Straw Peter, like moral tales.
Yeah.
Like cautionary tales. But they do have a kind of heart of darkness that you come through. I mean, okay, let's take Hansel and Gretel. Right, so Hansel and Gretel, in the way that we have kind of absorbed it, there's this stepmother. It's always the stepmother.
Always the archetype, yeah.
Well, in a lot of Grimm's tales, and to remember that they were kind of anthropologists.
Yeah.
So they weren't writing these,
No.
they were gathering them from all over. It's the mother. It's not the stepmother. It's the mother who does this thing. It's the mother who says, we can't feed them, let's let them loose, and they'll fend for themselves or they'll die. But we can't feed them. So we just replaced everything with that. And so actually, and the journey that Hansel and Gretel go on is that, the boy has agency in the first half of the story. He's the one that, he finds the pebbles that shine in the moonlight. He gets them home again. He's the one that puts the breadcrumbs out. They get lost. They get taken in by the witch. And then Gretel gets her agency in the second half. She's the one that gets him out of the cage. She's the one that gets them home. And it's got this brilliant duality in the story of like, who's the hero, who has agency, who's powerful, who's gonna solve this. And Gretel's the one that gets them home, and their father's there, and the mother's died, and they're reunited. So it's got this into the woods journey. They go into the woods, and a lot of the stories just literally or metaphorically go into the woods. You go into face the dark thing, and you find your power and your agency, and you come out the other side.
Yeah.
And so there's something really empowering, and I think for kids, the whole sanitization of it kind of removes that sense of empowerment that you can get from the original story. Yeah,
exactly. And I think, I suppose what I meant by like they end tragically, I think what I more meant is it's not happily ever after.
No, it's not.
It's triumph through adversity, but and lessons learned along the way. But like you said, someone dies, or that at the end there is that thing of like, and this is real.
Yeah, life is dark and light.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And so that, to come back to your original question, to really root it in something that felt real, and there's a fantastic book, you might know it, called Uses of Enchantment by Bettelheim. Bruno Bettelheim. And it is fantastic. It's about Brothers Grimm fairy tales and about all the ideas behind them and the kind of the meaning of the detail of those stories in a kind of psychosocial way. What they meant in society and what and why they're important. So for child psychology, why are they important? A child actually goes through that and experiences that. So we explored all that, and it was done in a really, really simple kind of, I guess what you'd call poor theatre, rough theatre way, which it's in the round, so there's no walls. It's like a stool, a bucket, a rope, a knife. It's very simple symbolism and kind of theatre craft, theatre making craft, I guess. So using the bodies of people and using simple objects to tell the stories really truly. And it was really, really interesting because we thought we were making a family show for kids and families at Christmas, which we were. But halfway through the run, we'd look out, we'd go, there's about 15 children in this audience of 600 people, because it was doing something that was theatrically quite interesting, and it was a big success, and people loved it.
Yeah.
We loved doing it because a little bit like we've got now, I think there was a really kind of committed company, committed to each other and the style of the work. And if you have that, and you all stay true to it, then I think you can really get into a piece and really make it kind of flourish. But I remember, I mean, Hansel and Gretel was the first story, and the young Vic in those days was almost always used in the round, which it is less now. 4 entrances. Hansel came down one, Gretel down another, the father down another, the mother down another, to this kind of cymbal clash and dark, and I was Hansel, and I came on facing Gretel, and we walked down with this fucking ominous, this is shitting hard, this life that we're stepping into in this story. And that story was probably 15 minutes, the first, but it would feel like we told this epic thing. And if it would be like if we'd get a cry of a child in the audience, or oh, my mummy, as we'd come down, we'd just get deeper into it. Yes, this is what it's about, kids. I'm sorry. This is where we're taking you. But so that felt really exciting to do that.
Yeah.
It felt kind of like we were doing something, even though it, like I say, it was poor theatre, and so that goes back millennia. It felt like we were breaking some new ground with a way of telling.
I actually think that sometimes that's the more inspirational and memorable thing, is actually when you don't have some massive production budget, the endless amounts of money that you can plow into these big effects or huge things. I mean, those are impressive as well. But one thing from, I don't know if it was this show, but from a production at the National Vic that's always stood out to me is they were telling a story and they had to fast forward and make it at night. And so they just opened a trap door and a white balloon on a string came up, and it was the moon.
Right.
And now we're at night and it's the moon.
Right.
And it just worked so perfectly. It was lit very nicely.
Yeah.
And it's I remember that more than some massive.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sparks a creative, imaginative way of thinking about how do we tell this story efficiently and cleanly, and there's something kind of, what's the word? I don't know. Is it pure, or is it just
well, I mean, pure can feel like it's got a judgment that there's
yes,
impure as
that's
well.
why I didn't want to say that.
But it is a word that springs to mind. I mean, the thing, we all love spectacle.
Yeah.
We love it, whether it's Son of Lumiere and fireworks, or in Theatre Royal Drury Lane and there's 200 people tap dancing, or a helicopter lands on the stage. It can be exciting, that.
Yeah.
But the thing about, the thing about theatre is that essentially, when you can come back to, we are telling a story to a group of people and we're all only experiencing it in this moment, really. Yeah, we've got a matinee tomorrow and we did one last night, whatever. But actually, we're all just in this together now. When you can kind of come back to that, that's when it feels really exciting. Actually think we've got a bit of that, in the way that we're working in the round again. And the thing that's really interesting about the round, and I hadn't, before the Young Vic, and I ended up doing a kind of 8 productions or something with Tim there, I think. 7 or 8. The thing about In the Round that I think is so amazing is that, the story is right in the centre and everybody is sitting round it, but you are as connected to the other audience members as you are to the story. So we're not all just sitting in the dark pointing in the same direction. I see you over there, and so my appreciation of the story, my engagement with the story, you are part of that. You hear and see people laugh, you see people get shocked, upset, whatever it is, we're all in this together, and we just happen to be the ones in the middle who are telling it. So in some, that connection that we all have as an audience, I think relates to the connection that we have to the story, that, theatre works in storytelling terms because we relate and identify and connect to things we see in front of us. But we're also connected to everybody that's sitting around in the same position as you, listening and watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why when you're in those shows where there's only a few of you in the audience, it feels a bit awkward because you're like, we kind of can't summon this beast without more of us here for whatever reason. I don't know what the science is behind that or if it even exists, but that's just proscenium March. But then if it's
energetically, we are all helping create this thing.
Exactly.
And there's that funny, I mean, we talked about it in the dressing room, that funny thing that, you know, you're only not allowed to do the performance if there's less people in the audience than there are on stage. So what's the science there? That we need the same amount of people facing us to kind of create this dynamic of energy where something happens.
And there has to be people observing and people doing. Eric told me this very funny story, Eric McLennan from the show, about he was doing this piece. I think it was at the Fringe, and it wasn't particularly well attended. And as part of the show, they would get people on stage. It was like they were a cult. And so they'd like initiate new members into the cult.
Nice.
And the audience would watch these punters go on stage and go through it. And that's kind of, that's quite interesting and maybe a vicarious thrill. And also like, I'm glad it's not me. All those feelings. He said one show they did it and there were only about 6 people in the audience and they needed 6 people for the thing. So they brought everyone on stage and they were doing it and they realised no one's watching. This isn't a show anymore. What is this now?
Or is it? Because maybe this is just the show between us. This moment is the show.
Yeah, but then they have to shuffle back to their seats, of course.
Of course. It's Peter Brook, isn't it? Peter Brook who says if somebody walks across the space and somebody's watching them, that's a piece of theatre. That's what makes theatre.
Yeah.
So his is like there has to be somebody watching.
Yeah.
But then our definition of theatre now is really different. It's kind of like, you know, with something like You, Me, Bum Bum Train.
Yeah.
You are...
Explain to people who don't know what that is. Okay. Yeah.
Now I'm speaking as somebody who's never got in to see it because it's really hard to get a ticket for You, Me, Bum Bum Train.
Yeah.
But this is how I understand it: that you go in individually, a little bit like Punch Drunk, which is immersive theatre where you are let into a space and you're allowed to free roam. You don't free roam in these different environments with You, Me, Bum Bum Train. You go on a kind of journey through these different spaces where different things are happening. So you might open a door and step onto a stage where you are conducting an orchestra. Or you might come through a trapdoor and be in a fully working kitchen where you have to chop all the onions to go into the risotto. So you are a participator and a kind of viewer, but I mean, if you've got to chop the onions, you've got a chef shouting at you. You're probably not looking around much, but you are immersed in it. So it's kind of taken immersive theatre to this other level of participation. And people have kind of said it's kind of life-changing because it's all the scenarios, as I understand them to be, they're very purposeful. You know, there is a very purposeful journey that it's taking you on. It's not like, wouldn't it be fun if, you know, you've got to referee a football match now? Or it's not. It's purposefully taking you on experiences that are going to make you think and feel something, and a journey that has you come out the other side where you're changed in some way. Well, I mean, yeah, that's theatre, but with the participation, which is the new bit.
Yeah, and without really an audience, I suppose, in any kind of traditional sense.
Yeah.
But I guess that theatre, I did some guerrilla theatre years ago.
Yeah.
Which of course doesn't, I mean, the audience are kind of like the general public.
Oh,
that's not as in the Great Ape, as in the warfare fighters. It's where you you plan out a show that you're going to do and you just impromptu stage it in public and sort of incorporate pedestrians into it. Bit flash mobby, yeah, exactly.
Boal?
Sorry?
Do you know?
Boal, yes. Boal. We were studying him at the time when we did that, yeah. It's strange work. It doesn't feed you in the same way that other theatre does. But if you've ever done improv or comedy or whatever,
it's got that live crackle though, hasn't it? Which,
yeah.
Lights go down 7:30. Yeah, here we go. Now I've got to concentrate. That's a certain type of dynamic with an audience.
Yeah.
You're in the shopping centre and something happens and people choose to watch or they don't. That's a different kind of crackle, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's probably why those things go viral online, where it's always like, you're not going to believe what happens next. Yeah. And it's like, some of them are fake and you sort of think, it's fake because people love the real thing so much.
Yeah.
And they're hungry to see things like that are just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Have you ever done any of that kind of work? You know Boal, so...
Yeah, I know Boal.
It's not something everyone knows.
No, I guess he's somebody I've encountered on the journey. I've never done... It's invisible theatre, isn't it? And action theatre. Invisible theatre is the one that just happens on a tube train, isn't it?
Yes.
I've always been really interested and kind of excited by the idea of it because his thing is all about political provocation, really, isn't it? Political with a small p.
Yeah.
And one I remember is on a bus or a tube train where wasn't there a kind of some kind of gender violence, a man being really awful to his partner or something, and I might be misremembering this, but at what stage do people intervene and go, this is not on, this is not right, this is it's making me think of the world today.
Yeah.
At what point do we intervene and go, this is not right? But that his whole thing was, engagement in the public in social, political issues. So I've always been excited about it, but I've never done it. I'm always excited about improv, but I've never done an improv show. I love the idea to do long form improv, where short form is another thing. That's kind of like who's funniest, fastest.
And that's kind of like parlour games as well. And we've kind of all had an experience of that.
Yeah, we have. But the long form, when I've seen it done in New York, it's so...
UCB.
You what?
UCB.
What's that?
That's the famous theatre in New York, the Upright Citizens Brigade, where that's the big improv one. But there are other ones as well.
Can't remember. But it was so cool. They did a Herald.
Yes.
And a Herald, I don't know exactly, but it's kind of like 5 actors, begins and ends with the scene of 5, then has a scene with 2, then a scene with 3, then a scene with 2, and I don't know the exact, but there's an exact form.
Yes.
And these folks were so brilliant because they tell a story in half an hour, 45 minutes, which is not all about laughs. It's, it's got lovely little character vignettes, and they plant seeds that then come back, and you just think, how did you create that? It's just beautiful. I'd love to kind of do it because I love that. I guess one of the things that's really interesting is the listening bit of improv, the listening bit of acting, of just like, we've talked about it, we're on stage together in scenes, and there's times when it's like, I'm really listening. I really heard Robert say that. And I really replied with the lines that we've both been rehearsing for the last month and performing for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's the weirdest thing where you go, I've really listened. But it's really the exciting bit when you go, that really happened. Or something really happened.
Yeah. I always think when a moment like that happens, it's like a double-edged sword because I'm like, oh, that's really vital, and so he's saying something to me that's really important, and I'm listening. Oh my god, and we're doing something, but then there's the other thing in the back of my mind that's like, so how many times have I just been saying these at him and pretending I'm full of intention, but not really being at all?
And I thought I was listening, but I was not listening at all. No, I know. It's a funny thing that, and it's just a weird little alchemy, I think, of being really present when 2 or 3 of you, or whoever's acting, when you just really suddenly feel, oh, yeah, we all know our lines, but actually we're really all very present in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're one of those people, I think, having performed with you for however long now, quite a long time, I suppose. I don't think I've ever seen you sort of like freeze up or not know what to do or dry. I mean, obviously you have difficulties that you overcome, challenges that you're like, oh, I have to do this. But have you ever in a professional context froze or I guess less seriously corpsed or something like that where
of course. That's much easier to answer than froze. That's interesting, the froze one. I mean, it feels like, I have the nightmare. I absolutely have the really boring, come on, just be a bit more creative with your nightmares, right?
Yeah, and then your pants fall down, and then your teeth fall out, and then you're in school, and then the girl rejects you, and it's like, oh my...
No, what it is I can't find the stage, or I don't know my lines, or I'm what I want in 5 minutes. I mean, it's like, shut up, you're an actor, that's really boring. And it might not be anything, I might not be anxious about being on stage, I'll be anxious about anything in my life, but I'm backstage and I can't find the stage. So that, and the kind of drying thing feels like it's a nightmare thing. Oh no, I tell you, I was in a casting. Where, and so many castings now are self-tapes. So you make a tape at home, you do it as many times as you like, you send it in. This was suddenly like in person. Oh, I'm going to meet in person this director and this casting director. Oh, this feels like old school. This is going to be nice. We're going to have a little chat, person to person. What I hadn't quite got my head round, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna read these whole scripts and I'm gonna really absorb this world, and I'm gonna do that before I focus on these lines that I should learn. And they weren't a lot. There was enough to kind of get my teeth into, and I was like, yeah, I've kind of got those. And on the morning, I was like, oh, hang on, have you like got them 100%? Maybe just really, really learn these lines. But I still felt I'm going into a room where I'm going to have a piece of paper in front of me and we'll just, we'll have this moment. It was really going into a room and self-taping with people sitting there. That's what it was. And actually, lovely as they were, I had a moment where they all had sides and I hadn't printed them up and I just went, oh, do you mind if I do this with sides? I know it, but it would be great for me to have it in front of me. And they went, oh no, fine. They didn't make any kind of deal out of that.
Yeah.
But then I did. In that moment, before they said action, I was suddenly like, you're in your nightmare. You are, in this moment, I just had this visceral feeling of, oh, I know this feeling. Because I have it when I'm asleep and I'm anxious. It's the feeling of you don't know what the fuck you're have to say next.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the worst. It was really, really horrible. And I learnt a lesson.
You get the job?
I didn't get the job, and I did write to the casting director afterwards. They let me do it a few times, and it was all cool.
Yeah.
And they were super nice. Yeah. But afterwards I felt like TFB, the fucking basics. Know your lines. What do you think you were doing? I've told many actor friends this story since, and one of them, a friend of mine, she said, oh, I had exactly the same. I was literally going to meet this director, foreign director, quite a big director from abroad, and I phoned my agent and I went, this is her telling the story, she said, and I said, are they going to expect me to know the lines? And their agent went, I think that would be normal, yes. And she went, can you tell them I'm ill, I can't go? And the agent was like, they're only in the country today, you've got to meet them. And she went, and she felt like I felt.
Yeah.
But she said they had a very nice chat and all that, but she felt the same as I felt.
It's a form of imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Like we don't have that enough.
Exactly.
TFB.
Yeah.
The fucking basics.
Yeah.
It is the thing that people go, ridiculously, how do you remember all those lines? You just feel like going, oh my god, that's stage one of 100 stages.
So low down. Yeah.
But anyway, that's one story. Corpsing is a whole other thing. Corpsing is something that I think feels fantastic for about 1/10 of a second.
Yeah.
And then feels shit for all the seconds after it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is such a great, dreadful feeling. Because I have, I've made a fool of myself, I've embarrassed myself, I've taken the piss out of the audience. My colleague is thinking, what the fuck, or they're laughing too, and that doesn't, it's just, it's a nice idea. It doesn't always feel great in my experience. Yeah,
and it's almost always, I feel the same with sort of with shouting or crying, even though I do those in our show. But I try not to do as much as, I think in first preview, I must have been yelling my head off the whole fucking time. Anyway, the point is, I think if you have that, it's almost always more powerful as an effect for those watching to take that and push it into something else. Because they feel whatever that was, that spurt of laughter or fear or tears, but they also then get moved in some other direction, and you steer something else through your body and your performance.
Exactly. I was just listening to, it was a thing on the radio yesterday, and it was about, I don't know what this series is, maybe they take big characters out of dramatic literature or something like that, and it was about Blanche Dubois from Streetcar Named Desire, and they had all these people talking about it. One of them was Kate Blanchett, and she said, talking about madness. So it's not interesting watching people playing mad. It's interesting watching a character try not to be mad, or something like that. It's like it's not. Otherwise, it's all just projection of an idea. Because Blanche doesn't think she's mad. She's trying to be normal. Yeah. So, and it's the same with emotion, and yet, but sometimes, you've got a big emotional journey to go on in this thing that we're doing. And sometimes I'm sure you find, as I do in some of the bits we do together, that the emotion just is there. It just catches you. You can't do anything about it. It's just suddenly like, I wasn't kind of going, let's be really something with this line. Yeah. But it's just there in the line, in the moment. Yeah. But I agree. I'd much prefer not to watch people crying on stage, but to make me cry in the audience.
Yeah, that's right. And I think with any of those extreme emotions as well, the more you can hold back, especially early on, the bigger the payoff will be later on. Yeah. There was this show that I watched called The Class, which was actually a Holocaust show. And it was about a class in Poland, and they were young, and then the war broke out, and it's like what happened to them. And it's kind of interesting for a while. It goes on, and then one of them dies, and they speak to the audience when they say how they died, and then this chair lights up on like the edge of the stage. It wasn't around. No, it was a theatre.
Oh, sorry. For some reason I thought it was right. Okay.
I can't remember where it was. It was years ago now, and I think there were 8 of them, and so this chair lights up, and this actor goes and sits down in the chair, and they're like, now they're dead, kind of thing, and the play moves on, and then someone else dies, and the chair lights up, and you think, oh, we're going to have to go through 8 chairs lighting up. And then the actor just sits there, like dead in their chair for the rest of the show. And you just sort of think, this effect is now completely ruined. And they didn't mix it up. You could think maybe there's an opportunity there to actually suddenly remove all the chairs, and there's only.
Us. If the audience are ahead of you, particularly you go. Oh, okay, we're 20 minutes in. 1 chair, 7 of them left. Fuck.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Oh,
you're doing the maths.
4 chairs left. Come on, can we knock a few of you off at the same time? It's bad. You can't be ahead of the audience. You can't have the audience ahead of you.
No.
Fatal. I've drunk too much herbal tea this morning.
You're going to go
pee?
I actually need to as well. Can you go up and I go down?
You can't go down because there isn't one down.
There isn't one down?
No.
You are listening to Bliss of the Abyss. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we've been talking quite a lot about acting, and I'm sure you've got lots more interesting stories. You've worked the National, RSC, Broadway. We barely touched on them, so if there's some good stuff there, please do tell me any anecdotes or productions or that are meaningful and that spring to mind. But we don't have to do that straight away.
I'll tell you one Broadway one because it relates to doing Grim Tales. Because Grim Tales was the show that we took to Broadway, or we took it to a theatre which is on the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway. So it's a Broadway theatre, but it does theatre for young people. So we're taking someone from the young group there, and that was Grim Tales. And the only little anecdote is, if you're in a show and it moves to another theatre, your whole set, your whole team, they go with it, and so this was the experience that I remember. We're in Tech on 42nd Street in the New Victory Theatre, and it's all very familiar. It's the set we know. We're doing the kind of stepping through a Tech, which, as you know, is kind of can be slow and methodical and technical. And everybody's around that you know, and you have a break, and then you go, oh, I'm just going to go out and get a drink, and then you open the door, and you're on 42nd Street, you're virtually on Times Square.
Yeah.
And that kind of weird, like, juxtaposition was the thing that was first most startling. It's like, what the fuck? And Times Square's all lights and
it's so
noise
crazy,
and people. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm not in the Young Vic anymore. This feels really different. The great thing about doing that show is that we were there for 3 months, and then
Amazing.
It's really I love being in another city, anywhere in the world, but feeling like I live there, like pretending I live there.
Yeah.
That thing of like, oh look, this is my flat, and here's the little place I get my coffee, and there's like whatever it is, finding your little routines.
Yeah.
And we lived on 72nd Street, so if you get the fast train, it's 2 stops to 42nd Street. So we just had these little apartments there, and we just had this little life coming backwards and forwards, doing the show over Christmas. I remember on the 23rd of December, and I think it was, what year was it? I think it was 1998, I think. 23rd of December, 3 of us decided to go to this salsa club called Nell's, which was very famous on 12th. And 3 guys, we go down there, we get there, and it's after the show, I guess, so we get there at like 10 o'clock or something like that. And there's nobody there really. There's a few people, there's a live band playing, and we get this little table on the edge of this big space where there's going to be dancing, and we're like, we're dancing tonight, guys, aren't we? Yes, we are dancing tonight. We're going to do this thing. And then gradually, over the next 2 hours, the place fills up with the most fantastic Latino dancers, you know.
Oh, really?
Like, I mean, people
kitted out.
Not so much kitted, a little bit, but just like, oh my God, these people can really do it. And you know, with any of those Latin dancers, the guy has to lead.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, it's basic. It's like, you need to know what you're doing. And so, I remember my 2 mates were sitting there drinking our margaritas or whatever we're drinking. And it's a beautiful place. There's a chandelier. It really feels like old school, kind of, it's all wood. And they go, we're not dancing. I'm like, guys, come on, we came down here to dance.
Yeah.
I can't dance. I can't dance with this. I can't. And I'm like, okay, I am not leaving here tonight without dancing.
Yeah.
And there were these 5 young women kind of leaning up against the wall at the side. And I was like, I'm going to go and ask them. And I went up, would you like to dance? No, thank you. And I literally
you go along
down
the line
with them going, one went, no, I don't like salsa very much. I was like, why are you here? I mean, ridiculous. I went down the line, and by the time I got to the last one, I was like,
would you please?
Come on,
would you
charity
mind?
Case. And she
Here's
went,
a
"All right."
£5.
And we went out there, and she was literally just like head up, down, looking at my feet, what's he doing? Her head was going up and down like, yeah, and I was like, I'm faking it. I know I'm faking it, but just go with me for this one number. And we finished the night, and we stepped out onto 12th, and it was now Christmas Eve, and it had snowed in the time we'd been out there. And stepping out onto 12th, Christmas Eve, snow falling and settling, and it was like, oh my God.
Magic.
This is just the best.
That's beautiful.
So that's my Christmas in New York story.
Oh yeah, Christmas in New York. Oh, it's magical. Yeah, I've spent many Christmases there. It's an incredible place for it, isn't it?
It's very atmospheric.
Yeah.
I mean, it's atmospheric at all times of year. If you if you're in the right bit of town, doing the right thing, and I love it. It's a great city.
But so we've been talking about acting, but like you said, you're a multi-hyphenate, which I think you may come to regret. No.
How many hyphens can I get?
Exactly. But producing work, you've got some I mean, big projects with big names that I don't know how much you can talk about, but very exciting, and stuff coming up and stuff that has been made with massive names. That sounds also fantastic, and I'd love to hear about that. But also directing, which is more hands-on, I suppose, than producing, and more creative as well.
Different hands-on.
Same
hands, different. They're doing different things. But yeah, well, okay. See, this is the bit that's really hard. It's like writing a biography that feels like it makes sense. How do you move from one thing to another? Because life isn't like that. Life, doesn't go from the shit shows to the good shows. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people, ask me for a biography, it's not that I don't remember what I've done. It's not that I can't talk about what I've done, but it's like, how do I make this not sound so scattergun and random to be meaningless?
Yeah.
But I'll do a segue for you, which
Okay.
is a New York one, and it is a kind of move into directing. So from doing a lot of acting in the 90s, through the 90s, and a lot with Tim Supple and other people, I guess by about 2000 I was like, I'd had a solid block of doing this acting work, and I was just looking for something a little bit different as well. Not instead, but as well. I needed to kind of step back a little bit from just going into a rehearsal room again, I think. Or certainly as an actor in somebody else's company. So that kind of timing fitted with these two guys in New York approaching me saying, would you help us create a piece of theatre? And one of them...
Did they just stop you on the street?
Yeah.
You look interesting. Help us create theatre.
No, they'd seen me doing salsa and they were like, he can make
Oh.
things on the spot. So it was... No, I knew one guy because I'd been at drama school with him.
Right.
He was... and this is how I knew him. I knew him as somebody who trained to be a doctor and then given it all up to do the thing he'd always wanted to do, which was be an actor. And he was a bit older. He was about 4 years older than me or something. And he was lovely. I loved this guy. He just always made me laugh. He was a really funny, really smart, interesting guy. White South African at the drama studio in Ealing. And now he's relocated to New York, and he approaches me, and he'd actually seen us do Grim Tales on Broadway. There's the kind of segue.
There we go.
And he was like, you've been doing this storytelling theatre work. I want to talk to you about a project. He, by this time, was a psychotherapist.
Yeah,
So-
well, they were talking about scattergun.
Yeah.
There's so many different things that he's going from, but yeah.
So his journey was, I visited him in New York. So I was at drama school in the late 80s, and I visited him in New York. The first time I went to New York in 1991, and I visited him, and he sat me down in this pizza joint on, I think it was on Broadway, but low down, kind of on Broadway. I've since gone back and I found the exact place because I remember it so clearly. And so this is 4 years after he left drama school. And he said, I went to drama school, and I was like, yeah, you had wanted to give it all up. He was like, yes, but in 1985 I was diagnosed as HIV positive, and I thought I had a year to live. But at that point, I literally thought I had a year, and I thought, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to do the thing I've always wanted to do. I'm going to go to drama school in London. Didn't tell any of us. He told one tutor at college, I think, and he told one of the other students who later became his life partner. And he told me that in 1991, and at that point I said, how are you doing? He said, well, I'm doing okay, but I'm on these drugs that are making me very sick.
Yeah.
I'm kind of vomiting in trash cans on the street if so he's on AZT.
Yeah.
And his T-cell count came really low in the early 90s, just as the antiretrovirals came in, and they just kind of picked him up.
Gosh.
He's alive today.
Yes.
So he was diagnosed in 1985. That's 40 years ago. He's 63. He's lived more of his life HIV positive than without. But he came to me in about 2000. He said, I want to make this piece with somebody I was at school with. And he's somebody who I've had a kind of checkered journey with, because at school, my friend Paul bullied Murray at school. They were two white Johannesburg, South African Jewish boys at a Jewish day school in Johannesburg, both of whom were, as teenagers, really just realising that they were both gay.
Right.
And my friend Paul basically used humour to deflect attention from him onto Murray, this other guy. And that was the kind of area of bullying, was a way to just like, let's single Murray out so I'm not singled out. And the two of them met 15 years later in New York, completely by chance. Paul had moved to New York after drama school. Murray had moved to New York a little bit later. Murray did a PhD at Columbia, so that's why he was in New York. And then Murray wrote a play that Paul's partner ended up directing. And his partner comes back one day and says, I'm directing this play by a South African guy from Joburg. You might know him. Paul said, well, who is he? I might not. He said, it's Murray Nossel. And Paul was like, oh my God. Yeah, I know Murray Nossel. And in fact, in all the kind of work I've done on myself since then, Murray is the top of my list of people I need to make amends to.
Oh my God, imagine all the feelings that came flooding back to him at that moment.
And Paul is what's the kind of way to describe Paul? You know, he's, like I say, he's done work on himself. He's a psychiatrist. He's very thoughtful and had clearly processed a lot of stuff. And when he went to the first night of his play, he's like, I'm going to address this. I'm going to meet Murray. And he went and they did the chit-chat about the play. And then he said, look, Murray, it's really nice to see you after all this time. But, you know, you probably don't remember, but before he'd even finished the sentence, it actually kind of moves me when I tell Paul's story. Before he'd finished the sentence, Murray said, I remember. And Paul said, I'm sorry. And they became best friends. I mean, they became really, really close. And there was stuff to unpick in their relationship. And I'm now kind of engaged by the two of them to think about this piece, which they want to tell the story of their friendship. They want to tell all of this, and so they approached me and said, look, I don't know, maybe you can help us think about this. And they started telling me about their idea, which was like, we want to tell this story and we don't want there to be any script and we don't want there to be any staging. And just as they were telling me, I was like, this sounds fucking brilliant. I don't know what I'd have to do, and I just said, I want to direct this. And they went, oh God, we hoped you were going to say that. I said, what do we do? And I got them over to the young Vic. By that stage, David Lan was the artistic director. David Lan is a white Jewish gay man. And I said, look, what do you think? Can we get these two over and I'll do some development work? And he said, yeah, yes, of course. So they came over and we did this work, and they came having sold this idea to me. They then came with these scripts, and I hadn't seen anything at this stage. And we did a week's work together. And the beginning of the first day, they got two lecturers, and they kind of read these stories, and I was like, guys, what about this idea? And they were like, I know, but we want to get it right. And so I said, burn the scripts. You can't get it wrong. What are you talking about? And I spent this fantastic week with them, realising that I needed to really help them with stagecraft, because, you know, although one of them had been at drama school 15 years before for a single year, they didn't really have very sophisticated stagecraft. And think, as an actor, that to not know what you're going to say or do on stage, you kind of need to know how space works and interacting with somebody else in the audience. You have to be quite on top of that. Anyway, I got them doing all this physical stuff. I got them rolling around on the floor. I remember them rolling around on the floor in this one exercise, and they ended up kind of half rolling over each other, blah, blah, blah. And I said, how was that? And we talked about it. And then one of them said, you do realise that's the most physical contact we have ever had? And I was like, Oh, okay, right. So that's my work. This is what I've got to do. I've got to get them physically comfortable, vocally comfortable, let alone creating this form where they have permission to talk about anything, to tell any story, and to feel safe doing it. So we created this thing called Two Men Talking. That's their title. They kind of conceived it, but then I kind of realised it with them, developed how it was going to operate, which was, you know, we went through a few stages of like, no, we need cue cards. And I kind of was like, okay. And I inside I'm thinking, I don't think that's going to work. Yeah. But anyway, they try it and they do a performance and then they kind of get lost in the cue cards and they're like, shit, I've told that story. It's like, guys, basically you need to be really present with each other, with the audience and with your story, and that's it. That's the triangle you create. And you start with each other, and that starts before you step on stage. So there was a lot of work, just the two of them, the trust. And they're both kind of, one of them's practicing Buddhist and the other is definitely Buddhist. And so they would kind of create this dedication before and after that would keep the space kind of safe for them, protect them. The after bit would be because people would come up and say, I need to tell you my story because your story has made me think about my story. And so they weren't just sponges of other people's stuff. We had to create this kind of container. So that was the connection between them and each other. The way the piece would start, lights up, house lights up, they'd come out, they'd sit, two chairs. On stage we had a few different bits of furniture, a box, a chair, a bench and different things that they could use. And they'd come and sit there and they would just take about 2 minutes looking at everybody in the audience. They'd just take a moment to just connect eyeball to eyeball. So okay, there's that contract. And now we start telling the stories. And they had this fantastic container of words, this little bookend. It began something like... in 1975, two 12-year-old boys in a Jewish day school in Johannesburg, South Africa, two 12-year-old boys were sat next to each other in an English class, and the teacher said, "Turn to the person next to you and share a story." And Paul would start this, and he'd say, and I'd turn to Murray and I'd tell him a story, and then I'd say, "Your turn," and Murray would say, "I don't have a story." And then they would start, they'd tell these stories, and at the end they'd say, in 1975, two 12-year-old boys sat next to each other in an English class, and the English teacher told them to turn to each other and tell a story. And Murray and I were the two boys who sat next to each other, and we told each other a story, something like we told each other a story, and we still are. Or something like that. So it was just like bringing it back to where it started. That idea of I don't have a story, which is something which we all feel. Yeah. I talked about it before you turned the mic on.
Exactly.
You know, what am I going to talk about? And the fact that it's an ongoing activity, you know, for all of us, and these two, you know, that they kind of leave the audience also really kind of thinking and reflecting on their own stories. And the most amazing thing, I guess, that you know, I learned so much from the two of them about theatre from two non-theatre makers by going through that process of what is the essence of what we do when we get together. And we talked about it when I talked about the young Vic. It's like we all connect and relate. It's about, you know, that shared experience and about us seeing something which we identify with. And we would do it we've done it all over the world. We took it back to Johannesburg, where the audience would say to us, how do you do this anywhere else? We know the school, we know that street, we know that family, these are our stories. And then we go to the assembly rooms in Edinburgh, and a little old Scottish pensioner comes up afterwards and says, that was so meaningful to me, I related to so much. And you kind of go, on paper, you don't have anything in common with these two guys, because it's not a story about HIV, and it's not a story about being gay, and it's not a story about South Africa, and it is about all of those things. Yeah. But it's just
human condition, human experience.
Human condition.
Yeah.
Exactly.
These pieces only last this long if they speak to that, you know?
Exactly.
Smaller pieces come and go, stuff like Shakespeare and Chekhov stays around for forever, because it's like it is about three sisters in Moscow and the ins and outs of their family 120 years ago, but it's not about that.
It's not about that.
That's the window dressing for the thing underneath that is a vehicle that can stretch back so far, and that's how you did that show for. So is it still going? Is it?
They still do it occasionally. I mean, I guess.
Yeah. So that's years,
from
decades.
2001, probably. For the next 10 years, they did it quite regularly. They were a regular feature off Broadway at a theatre called the Barrow Street Theatre. They came to Trafalgar Studios here. We did it in Australia and different parts of America. They got to a bit where their lives, they needed to move on from it a bit.
Yeah.
Even though it was never the same. People would come back because there would be some stories would always be in it. And in fact, like Paul talking about his HIV status, telling that story, there was one performance in Edinburgh where he tried not to tell it, literally because he didn't feel safe in the audience. Now, Edinburgh's a weird and wonderful festival, as I'm sure you know if you've been there.
Yeah.
But, somebody might be sitting in the audience because they looked at their watch and went, it starts in 5 minutes and it's through that door, let's watch.
Yep.
Not because I really want to see this thing.
Yeah.
And so there would be people sitting there like, what? These two guys are looking at in my eyes and talking to me, and what the hell are they saying?
Yeah.
And one performance, there were two people in the room who, inside their heads, were just thinking, what the fuck is going on? One was me in the audience, and one was Murray on stage thinking, is Paul really not going to tell that story, which is the defining story for who he is? And he got to the last few minutes of the piece and he couldn't not, because it's so much part of his identity. In fact, the journey he's been on, he talks about so brilliantly. He went to some Native American healing ground on the top of a mountain at some point, and he had this kind of moment of realization that kind of, as he described it, this is part of my body. And it does not work for me to be fighting with it, because I'm going to live and die with it. However long my life is, it is part of me for the rest of my life. So I cannot be in conflict with it. I have to accept it. And he had this amazing realization that I think is part of why he's alive today. His mental approach to it, I think. Anyway.
Wow.
So there's a few things in there, and the work. One of the things I do now is I run this company with Jane, my wife. Where the two of them, Paul and Murray, started in New York called Narrative.
Yeah.
Narrative works with personal stories, so I learn a lot about how theatre works, at its essence by doing that piece, and now that has translated into how personal story works, how the sharing, how the creating spaces where people get to hear themselves tell their story, have somebody else listen to it, hear somebody else's story, that kind of connective tissue that listening and storytelling can create between human beings. It's kind of feeling like ancient and really like more and more and more important every day in this current world of that kind of listening and finding we share so much more than we don't share. With any human being on earth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a number of our work.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, I want to hear all about it then, about how it works, what it's like. Does Jane want to come in?
Yeah, Jane, do you want to join us?
The bliss of the abyss is here now.
Jane is going to join from the wings.
Perfect. I don't. You're going to have to share the mics. You might.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Scooch that sofa over the
little chair. So, having created this piece of theatre,
I'm getting the baby chair.
I can get the baby
No,
chair.
I'll get the baby chair.
And
welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're on the naughty step.
I'm very much on the naughty step. Always.
Always.
Well, you were talking. Dan was telling me a story about two men talking and the origin of that and the evolution of that, and we were talking a bit before about storycraft and telling stories, and then obviously the work with narrative came up, which you two run together.
Yeah.
And so this is a great opportunity for me to ask you two about that work, what it's like to work together as a husband and wife, how easy or difficult that is, challenges and also bounty that comes from that, but also the work you do and what your mission statement is. Do you have lofty goals, or is it just a job? All of those kinds of things.
We have a very lofty goal, actually. We do have a mission statement.
Great.
It's on our email signatures. Well, it's on mine. I don't know about what's on yours. And it is a world connected by listening and telling personal stories. And I think when Paul and Murray started it, the loftiness of that goal was at the forefront of their mind, because you can connect to anyone through their story. You know, we have this set of principles that we work with, and principle number 2 is everybody has a story. And probably every day when we go and do a workshop, somebody will say to us, oh, I'm not a storyteller, I don't have a story, my experience is not valuable. And the truth is, in my experience of doing this now for 15 years in London at least, everybody does have a story, and that story can connect any two people, really. Mm-hmm. And there are organisations who, alongside our organisation, the Forgiveness Project, for example, who put together extraordinary people, perpetrators and victims or relatives of victims, to share their story. And of course the roots of that for Paul and Murray are in Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, where you put together people to share their stories. And of course we can be amazed at actually how people can connect. And so a world connected is not actually a lofty ideal. It's basic. That's what humans do through our communication and connection and storytelling.
It's interesting as you talk about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, of course, because it's like we are in a world now where stories have to compete. The social media is making everything compete for attention and for agreement. And the whole thing about the Truth and Reconciliation space was just creating a space where everything could be heard. It's not the advocacy of a courtroom where this story versus your story, perpetrator versus victim, criminal versus it's somebody who's accused versus somebody who's going to try and make sure that they go down. That's a courtroom, but a space where you just listen is about empathy ultimately, isn't it? It's about my job is not to listen in order to disagree with or find fault in, or it's listening to connect. And I think that's the powerful thing about how stories have the potential to work in the world that we are in now.
Yeah, and you're also talking about how the value of stories and the valuing of stories, which I would say is the core thing that I've learned, is that all stories have value. And if you operate like all stories have value, what you get is really valuable stories. Because when someone is listened to and they know that they're being listened to and they know that what they're saying is being valued and not judged, that they're being listened to openly, then an extraordinary story can emerge. Most of the time we're judging ourselves, so we don't bother to even speak what we really might like to speak. But when you know that you're listening to yourself with compassion and other people are listening to you with compassion, then all stories become valuable. And we've had workshops where people will tell a story of something that might be really exotic and extraordinary, and then next to that somebody will tell one small moment that happened in their day at home with one other person, and each story has its beauty and its place and its importance. So it's all about valuing.
And I think one of the real challenges I keep bringing it back to the current state of the world, I guess, partly because of the play we're doing and stuff, but it means we need to value Trump's story and Putin's story along with everybody else's story, and that is the challenge for us, because it's like I want to shut him out, and I want to, but
yeah, and also you also of course have to compete with lies masquerading as stories, which is a very different thing.
Exactly.
But they can present exactly the same mask,
exactly.
and you can think it is a story, but it's a lie, and that's a very challenging. And have you ever had people come to your workshops who do just tell a lie or something? Or, I mean, how would you know, I suppose, although sometimes you do get that feeling of when they're telling a story of like, is this the full story you're telling me, or is this the real story you're telling me? Or
yeah, it is a really interesting question, because whenever we tell a story anyway, we're using our memory and our imagination.
Yeah.
And so we can all be an unreliable narrator anyway of what's really happened. You know, you asked what's it like to work with Dan. Well, the nature of it is that we have many experiences that are the same, but we will, if you asked us about them, they would occur to us completely differently, and we both think that we're telling the truth. Now, of course, there are actors, I don't mean actors on the stage, but I mean actors, people doing things in the world, who know precisely the power of a story and have created narratives to do a particular thing that patently aren't true. But sometimes on workshops we will have people who kind of say, "Oh, I just made that bit up," and you can always tell. You know, the body language gives people away, and sometimes it comes from people not trusting that actually their story is good enough or interesting enough. And so they make something up.
It is a rare thing, though.
It's rare, yeah.
You know, we're very clear that the only rules with our storytelling is it has to be true and have happened to you. So it's not you telling a story of something that happened to your brother or your friend. You know, tell us something that happened to you. We've, interestingly, about this thing about what's true, and another kind of link to what's it like to work with your partner. We made a piece, a theatre piece, about intimacy, which basically used all the stories from our lives. So from childhood, stories from my childhood, stories from Jane, about two lives that come together and intersect, and the story becomes a joint story, a shared story. And we just really explored in this piece, which incidentally we performed in people's kitchens, we explored the different modes of storytelling. So we did tell a story, both told the story directly to the audience from two perspectives. Then we told one together, where we kind of started telling it together, just like Jane and I might tell you a story now, and then ended up both speaking at once, telling different versions of it, and then come together. And then we told it in total unison. We just explored all different types of shared story, really trying to kind of unpick this idea of what is true ever when you tell a story from your life, and how memory works. And we'd go into people's kitchens and we'd start the whole piece by saying, "Hello, we're Dan and Jane. We're married."
There we go, did it together.
Yeah.
Go on,
and
keep going.
Say, we live together.
Well, that's one version, yeah.
We live together, we live here. So this is our house. So it would start with
wherever we were in the world.
You know we're Jane and Dan, you know we're married. Do you think we live here? You probably know that we don't live here and this is not our house, but we're going to pretend that it is. And then we say,
I feel like this is a
it is.
It's
You're doing well.
It's a line of Jane. Everything is everything.
Yes.
Everything we're about to tell you.
Oh, we'll see. We'll check the text for who was more correct after. Keep going.
About to hear. You're right.
Yeah.
Everything you're about to hear is 100% fiction. And then we would just tell stories from our life. And
that was the thing that really confused people, because some people would know, no, hang on, but I know that really happened. but they're telling us, they've said that it's fiction, like what?
So we just kind of messed with people's heads. That's a little diversion, talking about Small Space, our kitchen show.
That's really interesting.
So and you asked at the beginning about that portfolio, you know, how to bring the different bits of different portfolios, different folders I've got in the portfolio into one. It's like how do we do our work with narrative, where we essentially mostly go into organisations and businesses and work with groups of people for advocacy of some sort. So it might be a charity or a mission-based organisation, or it might be a big multinational where, for leadership, the idea of storytelling is an important thing. How do we bring that together with our creative practice where we make things and we are, trying to make artifacts of some sort in the world? There's the theatre, film and whatever. So more and more those things interweave in our work.
So you find the work you do in narrative playing into, for example, the film that you're producing, that I know you can't really talk about, so I can clap, it's fine. We can cut anything out, or you can talk about it. Either way, we've got a clap marker now.
I can definitely talk about the film. I can't talk about a few people who are attached, because they're only attached, but I can talk about everybody who's involved in the film. Yeah.
And that work, do you find that work feeding in?
It does. I mean, there's a couple of projects. That film comes out of, like a lot of pieces of narrative work, I guess, comes out of real stories that have been gathered by the two people who've written it, and that's Camille Toman, the writer-director, and Tobias Menzies, who's the writer and is playing the main part in it. So they read a load of articles and met a load of people who have an experience of ALS, or motor neuron disease.
The Ice Bucket Challenge.
The Ice Bucket Challenge, indeed. 10 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah,
maybe
something
more.
like that.
2011.
2011, there, she knows.
Because I remember you doing it in a
Oh no, really?
park in Florida.
I did.
Is that still on the internet? I'm going to find that.
Probably somewhere, probably on my
It will be.
Facebook. Yeah.
It will be.
So, ALS, motor neuron disease, and it's about a man, and this is where the stories they found, where it relates to finding news articles and things. A man who chooses to bring all his friends and family, or a group of friends and family, together for one day of kind of celebration, which will end with him withdrawing his own treatment at the end and dying, witnessed by his friends. And this is the thing that people are doing more and more, a kind of very conscious assisted dying choice. Now, it's not a film which is kind of campaigning for assisted dying, because it's not about that, but it's at the heart of our film that the guy chooses to do it. And here in this country, you are allowed to withdraw treatment. You're allowed to choose to have to say no to the treatment. So it's not him taking a cocktail of drugs, but he is having his respirator turned off and then given a sedative, and it's the end of his life. So it feeds into the work like that, and it also feeds into the work in the way that this director, who is a wonderful, a kind of maverick, really interesting director in terms of the way she works with actors. We've been working for a number of years as a small group of actors, Tobias and about 6 of us, to just create this language between us of working. It's not been about, what's your backstory, but it's really kind of using some Meisner techniques to just like, what is real between me and you? So my character with Tobias, and I should hand over to you, Jane, because I've been talking a lot on this podcast, but my character with Tobias, we're 2 architects who run a firm together. Now, we're supposed to have run it for 10 years. I've only known Tobias for 6 years. But what's real in the dynamic between me and Tobias that feeds into who we are? So it's no acting required. It's just what we create in the moment between us. And that we've done loads of work on that with this director and the other actors, which is really interesting.
And to pick up from the work that we do with Camille, and Camille is really interested in this idea that narrative is all about, which is about, it's the listening, it's the quality of the listening, the paying attention that creates the story that can be told. So like Camille as a director is brilliant to work with, because what she's really interested in is creating this optimal listening environment where everyone is just tuning into one another, and then that makes whole different set of conversations possible. You know, if there's a group of actors in a room and actually they're feeling uncertain or they're feeling like they're in competition, that's going to create one kind of thing. But she is all about creating a space where you can come and contribute and know that you are going to be listened to, you know, and it's generative.
Removing obstacles.
Exactly. As you know, having acted with many people and in many different contexts, not all directors are about removing obstacles. And you know,
and it can be an interesting. You know, sometimes you're going to get something.
Oh, sure.
From setting an obstacle to somebody because it's interesting. Oh, how is that person going to get past that?
And there are different types of obstacles, aren't there?
For sure.
You know,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, there can be purposeful ones, but as we know, some directors that are not purposefully
to get an instant result. They don't even know they're creating the obstacle. They're creating the obstacle.
Exactly. And you were kind of going like this with your hands showing, like a kind of bowl. And I think that you know that. If I think about how Tim works, and I think good directors know that creating the space is such a large part of it. Creating the environment is a large part. Not having the ideas and telling people what to do, it's creating the environment. And you reminded me, talking about Camille, we did this great weekend's work with a cinematographer who was going to be on the project. And she was getting us to just do improvisations, I guess, is the best way to describe what we were doing, with the camera there. And she was really like, you cannot pretend that the camera is not there. That doesn't work, because he is there. And she kept saying to the cameraman, don't try and be invisible. You're another human being in the room with this great big bit of kit on your shoulder. So it's not like, but it's neither is it that there's a camera in the room that you're looking at and acting to. You've just got to be conscious that that is an energy in the room which is affecting all of us. And so that kind of idea of everything being held, not shutting things out and pretending there's this artifice, but just the reality is that we're in the room too, and that's okay. And that's part of what you've got to work with.
And it can feel counterintuitive when you start doing that, because as actors, well, we're really good at exactly, and pasting over things and making things work that maybe could feel problematic. It's like smoothing things out. So that idea that I don't have to smooth anything out because it just as it is right.
It reminded me of, I think it's a Stanislavski thing, you know, about the circles of attention.
Oh yeah.
It reminded me of that, and then so usually you have the first circle of attention is yourself and anyone who's like directly in your space, and then the second circle is those who are close, and usually the third circle is like the audience or the people further out there. In this case, it's like you've put the cameraman into one of the circles instead of being outside of it. And that creates a different kind of attention from them and from you as well, which might result in something quite interesting.
It's that attention to what's there. The other thing you made me think about was that brings it back to working together as a couple. And it does mean we spend a lot of our time together. And regularly.
I mean, a lot.
But so regularly people go, oh my God, how do you work? Oh, how do you do that? Oh, I could never do that with my husband. I could never do that with my wife, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Part of our work is about listening. You know, you said it's a listening and storytelling methodology. And we have a kind of practice called clearing listening. It's something that you and I do when we work together. It's not, we don't get up every morning and do it. But it's, if we're going to work together on narrative, we clear our listening, and that gives us a moment each to stop and, with the other person listening, articulate what is going on for us that might be an obstacle, that might get in the way. And that could be anything. And when you, you know, it can be, oh, I'm really hungry, I need to go to the loo, or it can be physical, it can be, I'm really worried about this thing, or that thing that we just did, and it can be, I'm really pissed off with that thing that you said a week ago. You know, if you know somebody well, it's possible. We don't regularly say I'm really pissed off with you, but it does give an opportunity to go, actually, you bugged me a bit when you did or said that. And the key thing about clearing listening is that, say I said that to Jane, Jane's responsibility is not to go, as we would normally as human beings go, no, well, no.
Yeah, no, hold on, I didn't mean it like that. And actually you did. Yeah.
Is just to listen. And Jane knows that she's not responsible for that. That's just what's in my listening.
Yeah.
Maybe something happened, but I'm responsible for what's in my listening.
Yeah.
And all you do is you listen, and then you say thank you. And then the other person goes, blah, blah, blah. And
it's really useful because you can say things that are really hard to say, but they're in a framework of, I can say this thing, and Dan is not going to take it personally.
Yeah.
Or if he does, he can then clear, I'm finding it really hard because I'm taking this personally. But it means that you're not tripped up by the emotion. Because to say, yesterday I felt really angry about ... is very different to being really angry, going, you did this fucking thing. You're not tripped into it, but you're able to, take responsibility for what bit is your responsibility, but also to air it, and then you don't hold grudges.
Yeah.
And I think that is the secret to being able to live and work together, because there's not a whole load of stuff that's stored up.
Exactly, and you will regularly have, as I do, I mean, not in an extreme way, but regularly there'll be something I'm listening to, and as you clear your listening, where I instinctively want to go, yes but, no but, and I just have to go, this is Jane's listening. This is just what's going on for her, and I'm not responsible in this moment for that. I just have to understand what's going on in my listening. It's very kind of clean process. It's really helpful, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, this our two US founders. One is a psychiatrist, the other is a psychologist, anthropologist. So that's where that practice comes from. But we teach it to teams of people who work together, who, have to, figure out a way of working together every day and being productive, even though, one of them might have a toothache, one might be getting a divorce, one might, so if in a team everybody is actually able to express that, then it's like, phew, I don't have to pretend that that's not going on, it's going on.
And you don't have to take care of
now
everybody
let's
else.
get to work. I mean, in the work that I do with Eric and I clear listening at the beginning of every day. That's something that we do together when when we're away on tour or whatever. And it's just really useful to become present together. Okay, and now this is the job in hand. This is what we're doing. We can get rid of all the distractions.
Fantastic. That's amazing. It's just a beautiful practice, and it's like a ritualized part of the work that has probably enabled you to do this thing together for so long, and it seems like a small thing, and yet it's probably the cornerstone that opens so many possible avenues and clears unintentional obstacles, and then you can put intentional obstacles if you want afterwards.
I think that's right, and it's, even though it could sound a bit woo-woo, it's really practical. It's really, really practical. Because it's, I'm going to clear my listening, and I just get a moment to really stop and go, what is going on for me today that I haven't even noticed is going on? And you just speak it, and you're done.
Well, I tell you one thing that is going on is that we have a time crunch, unfortunately. So I'm not going to get to hear any more of your stories or anything like that. I will say thank you very much for coming on the show. Do you have any pearls of wisdom that you want to leave us with? No pressure.
Pearls of wisdom.
What is this podcast called, by the way?
Now you ask.
Because I just wandered in 3/4 of the way through. I don't know what this is, but what is this podcast?
It's called Grill Jane. It's where we get down to the facts.
Grill Jane.
Of the abyss, Jane.
Oh, the bliss of the abyss.
That's right.
Oh, well, that's a whole other... my pearl of wisdom comes from when I was in a hot spring in...
Lake Tahoe?
Near Lake Tahoe, doing a rebirthing workshop, doing lots of breathing. The bliss of the abyss, the bliss of just being in your senses in that moment.
I would just say that, everybody has a story. Value your story. It has value.
Well, look, thank you both so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a brilliant episode.
Lovely to talk.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. It really, really, really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many, many thanks to Nils Hennis-Steer for the amazing music and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more Bliss of the Abyss.
Message 1.